Well, good afternoon. This is Fred Guitton, Chief Revenue Officer here at Red Team Software. We're excited to today get to speak a little bit about understanding workflows and frankly, using that understanding to save time and money. In construction, there's just a lot going on, a lot of information flowing back and forth. I mean, you think about commercial general contractor with the subs, with rental material provider, the subcontractors, the owner, design team, and then inside your own organization, right? You got your team in the field building stuff. You've got a team inside of the office. You've got your accounting team, and you want to make sure that everybody's harmonized and all the information flows correctly between all the different people. So this whole workflow concept is really important. And one of the things that I would say about workflows and spending time to understand your workflows is really, why do you want to do that? Like, what is really the objective that you're trying to solve to? So set clear goals, right? And in having that context in mind is really important, because if you try to map everything, and I'll share a little bit of a story that I lived with. It was in the finance industry, but nonetheless very similar in many ways. We drew the workflow, and as we started drawing the workflow, we went into the detail at every single step. We ended up with a document that was literally 8 feet tall by 12 feet long, of all these workflows, trying to understand, okay, well, what happens if this happens, and then what happens then, and what happens then, and who does that, and how much time do they spend on it. And so, really be clear about, what are you trying to accomplish? Otherwise, this can become just a massive, undertaking, and may not get as much value as you'd like. So, the goal setting is really important. I mean, oftentimes we think about this and say, I'm going to reduce inefficiencies. And we get this, like, it's important. Like, we want to optimize our construction workflow documentation so that we don't have, ineffectiveness, right? And so what are the steps that you take, and are they the right steps? One of the big things in terms of inefficiencies, they're often tied to actually legacy behaviors, things that we've done this way for so many years, and we've never challenged ourselves to think about, could we do it differently? So reducing inefficiencies becomes kind of a theme in general that we find when people think about managing workflows and understanding them. On the other hand, you have also reducing the risk of errors. What are things that I'm dealing with in terms of my workflow, and there are mistakes being made? Like, there's things that you find out, maybe in the subcontract agreement, there is things that are being missed. So what do you need to do to figure out where's that error coming from, right? Is there a workflow process that we have in our company that we should look at? And frankly, time is oftentimes the cause for error, because there is so much, frankly, energy that gets spent in documenting and tracking and organizing and documenting and email and calling and texting and all this kind of stuff. And so you feel pressed for time, and then mistakes are made, and you forget this one conversation. And that one conversation may mean, yeah, I let them pour the concrete and we weren't ready, right? And something went wrong, right? I mean, it can get to really big problems. So, thinking about the workflows is, sometimes it's not just making that workflow more efficient. Sometimes it's, is that workflow more efficient, and then is it giving me time for something else, right? That actually is the problem. So sometimes you're actually looking for a direct, well-defined solution to a problem, which could be just finding time, right? Quality, right? Oftentimes what we see in construction is, do people have the exact right information at the exact right time? Do they know what they need to be doing? And sometimes quality ties back to, did I have, the appropriate equipment? Did I have the exact right materials that I needed? Did I have the right amount of time to do it? I mean, time is often this recurring theme, right? I'm having to redo it, right? And people say, well, it's less rework. And of course, less rework is important. Rework is expensive in terms of you have to do it again, and you keep running out of time. I mean, we all have seen that one project where there's a certain sequence you have to follow, and there's this moment in time where Maybe it's just the painter has to get started right now, or the drywall. And if they can't start that day, they're going to go on to the next project. Those things are really important. So the quality in itself is an important element, but thinking about it more broadly is in terms of, well, what is the source of the problem? So I'm going to take this a little bit in a different direction. And to me, when I think about goal setting, when it comes to what you're trying to accomplish in understanding your workflows, I would be careful with just reduce, make it better, make it faster, less risk. Be more clear with your intent. Be more clear about, there's a problem that I see here, and I want to save 25% of my time on our RFIs. Or maybe I want my RFIs to be answered in that amount of time consistently. Like, let's set a clear objective, and then you can start drilling down into the workflow relative to that particular problem. And you may come back, by the way, and say, I don't think we can make it better. I don't think it's realistic, right? But the point is, start from the end point. Otherwise, you just document without anything in mind. I want to have 100% daily reporting. Every single day, I want daily reports on every one of my jobs. Now, we all know that that's not always true. Okay, so why is the team not, getting 100% daily reporting? Maybe they actually document it, but it ends up instead in the truck, right? Maybe they don't have the right tools, right? Mobile applications and things like that become important, making it easier for them to do the work, right? If they have the right tools and they're not doing it, is it because they don't see the value? So maybe it's education, right? It's really important to kind of really think through what is driving certain behaviors. And some of it may be, hey, workflow on onboarding, we don't actually spend enough time giving people context as to why the specific elements are important to us as a company. They may feel meaningless, but in reality, in the greater context, once you have context, you actually understand how important that is. We've seen an example a few years back where a company was pulling data reports, and they pulled the physical data reports at the time. They were still doing manual reports, and there was a series of data reports that basically the note on it says, "I filled these out so I can get paid." So yeah, 100% compliance, but they were useless. So maybe the goal changes to, I want to have 100% data reporting, and I want to make sure they're reviewed, that they actually are meaningful to the company. Or I want to reduce my cost of managing all my vendor invoice management or subcontract invoices to X dollars per invoice. We have a product called Team Player, and I'll speak to that later. That's a big part of it. Or it could be, I want to reduce litigation costs. Is it a big problem in your organization, or is it turnover costs? I'm not retaining my staff, right? Are they leaving because they're not happy? Are they leaving because the workflow is too difficult? Like, what are causing those things? Or are they not trained the right way, so they are lost, and so we're not able to retain talent? All of that typically will tie to some workflow. So I think one of the traps in construction is that we think of workflow and we constrain it to just the project. My invitation is for you to consider, workflow as a company is one dimension, workflow inside the project is another dimension. And setting up clear goals around, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, it's called SMART goals. It's a very known methodology. I would really invite you to take it from that place, basically, in how you think about it. So when you start actually doing your workflows, it's not just, this simple map of there's a button, there's an arrow, and this happens. It's really good, dig deeper, right? Who does it? When do they do it? Why do they do it? How much time do they spend doing it? How much risk is associated with the way they do it? Like, start quantifying your workflows. Being able to draw a map of workflows is good, but asking the questions around, well, okay, there's just one arrow. Is that arrow an hour, a minute, a week? What makes that arrow become shorter or longer, right? If you think about those arrows as like matter of time. And I've seen workflows, by the way, where the arrows were measured by time, and all of a sudden the workflows look really, really messed up, right? You have things that you go, well, why is this box like, a foot away from this other box? Well, it's because this takes a really long time. Do we need to solve this? And sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But ask yourself the question, right? So by digging into your workflows, you're gonna be surprised what you find. You're gonna find some inefficiencies going, are you serious? We spent that much time on this? It costs this much? I mean, we've seen this. I had this conversation not long with one of our customers, and we talked about invoice management. The subject matter of that conversation. And I told him, I go, I wouldn't be shocked if you spend between 80 and $100 to manage each of your vendor invoices. And he goes, oh, that's crazy. We don't spend that much money. I was like, all right, cool. How many AP clerks do you have? He's like, we're going to do this. I was like, sure, let's do it. Let's see how far off we are. And so we looked at how many AP clerks, how many vendor invoices per month, how much time each project manager was spending reviewing the information, how many emails back and forth. And when you say, well, there's 5 emails, I go, how long does an email take? He's like, well, writing an email takes a minute. I go, okay, but you have to stop what you're doing and start again. So really, he goes, okay, fine. So, I think we gave each email a value of like 10 minutes. And I was like, what's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario in terms of how many times you have to go back and forth with your sub? What does that mean? And then we ended up with kind of pretty rough calculation, but something that was pretty close to the truth of how long it took from the time they received the invoice to actually get payment made, or actually payment approval, because payment made in their case was a pay when get paid, so they didn't have as much control over that. But it was really just managing to final approval for disbursement, right? And I believe their time period was like somewhere around like 20 some days. I mean, it was pretty long, but the cost was over $120. And he paused. He was like, I cannot believe we've done this way this whole time, and I didn't know how much money I was spending on it. And that's because I think as companies, we have these things that just becomes, what's the cost of doing business? And sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, why is it? Or should we accept this? And that's when workflows become really critical, but not get trapped into just boxes and arrows. Really think about it more in terms of who does it, when do they do it, why do they do it, how much time do they spend on it? Is there a risk, by the way? Is this person really qualified to do this? And we've all seen this in companies, right? You get an invoice from someone, and it's a progress billing that's pretty complex, and you go, who created this? I've been on the job 2 weeks. I just did this Excel spreadsheet, and the guy told me how to fill it out, and I just did that. And they don't really know rhyme and reason to it. So if you call them for information, they don't know what to say. So now you've all wasted your time because you can't get to a result. So really, that's why I think about understanding workflows, right? I mean, I could have done a call about like, here's how you draw it, here's what tools you can use. I mean, there's a million tools online to create graphs and all that kind of stuff. But what should be in it is much more meaningful to you than just how do we actually draw it out. And again, the what should be in it is who does it, how much time, how much risk is associated with it. So you start quantifying those different tasks. Is more the approach. Now, before you do all of this, so there's a first question is you have to be sure, are we open to change? And don't ask yourself, am I open to change, right? Because, I could be leading an organization, and typically people who lead organizations or are managers have a certain level of comfort around change being kind of the nature of the beast. The question is your team there, right? To me, what I have found is that it is the number one obstacle. So don't ever underestimate it. You really have to earn that conversation with your team. And what I have found really interesting is by doing these types of workflow work and get your team engaged in it, don't do it in a silo, right? Discuss it with them. And why are you doing this? So I want to make your life easier. Should be the only answer they hear, right? Because they have to see the benefit for themselves, right? Otherwise, it's like, well, I want to find a way for you to spend half the time doing what you're doing. They're going to hear risk for their job. And by the way, most of the case, that's never the outcome. Is there's always plenty to do. And there is things that we're not doing well enough, that we have inefficiencies. It's like, well, now instead of doing this, which is really tedious, you're going to work on the more important project for the company besides that, because now you have the time to do it. Right? And that's where an ROI comes in. It's not just, well, I save these hours. It's more, how much better can we do the work we have to do to maximize profitability optimize customer experience and all of that. So, think about, as you get into those conversations, bringing your team so that they engage in that conversation and that openness to change, because typically when you look at workflows is with an intent of figuring out, do I need to change something? If you already know from day one that your team is going to fight you, that might be the first thing you have to address before you spend any of your time talking about workflows. So just an important element. So there's some questions you'd want to answer in terms of thinking about my workflows. How can I increase my efficiency through optimization, right? And really, sometimes that forces you to say, I can't, and that's okay, right? I mean, the time it takes to drive a truck from one place to another with 20 tons of sand is the time it takes. You're not going to make the truck go faster, right? So you're not going to optimize that any more than what it is, right? There may be other things to consider. Is I'm going to stage the area so it's easier for the truck to unload and things like that. But that can be that simple of a conversation. Even in document management, you have the same type of things, right? There are certain things that are going to take a certain amount of time, and so really thinking about, like, how can we increase so that we can make sure we don't spend time focusing on workflows that cannot be improved upon or are not low enough hanging fruits for us to focus on, right? And then what can I do to work with my team from anywhere at any time for maximum productivity? In the past year, this question has been a huge headache for many construction companies, right? We've had this, quarantine situations for a period of time. You've had kids that work from home. You've had construction companies where someone comes in the office and they test positive for COVID, so now people have to isolate for a period of time. you know, what is the loss in productivity you have? So what tools and solutions and workflows do you need to have to get ahead of that? And I will say that when it comes to what we do as an organization, right, cloud-based software, companies that have had that in place have had major benefits. It's like, hey, take your laptop, and you're not sick. You just can't come in the office, but you can still work. And for the employees, it's like they're not forced to take time off and things like that. It's really beneficial. So really thinking about what can we do, and oftentimes it's really mechanical in terms of what tools do we have for the team to do that. Other questions to think about when you dig into your workflows is, what are the bottlenecks, right? And by the way, whoever is a bottleneck does not know they're the bottleneck. They're just very busy. That's typically who that person is. So that person will very rarely self-identify. They go, no, I just work really hard. I've got a lot to do. And they don't realize they've become a bottleneck, right? So when you look for your bottlenecks, really look at third party and say, it just seems here something is stuck. So there may be a way to do it differently to solve this bottleneck, because, like I said, the invoice from subcontractor review could be a bottleneck. Like, someone has to enter them in and validate them, and maybe that process takes too long. And so by the time the person who is working on it receives that actual document, is 2 or 3 days have passed, and they've already had 5 phone calls from the subcontractor going, hey, did you get my invoice? Did you review it yet? And all that time is time that's been wasted, right? So it goes back to where's the time going, right? So really asking yourself, and even doing some observation with your team and asking and interviewing, and goes, okay, tell me, what does your day look like? I'm just really busy. Okay, cool. What do you do? Exactly. Like, tell me a little bit about how your time, and ask that question multiple times to the same people or the same roles to see, is there patterns in here? Are there things that you go, well, wait a minute, you spent how much time doing what? And sometimes it could be, yeah, I'm always working with that printer because it's always broken. And all you had was a $150 problem. I just need to get a new printer. But someone in IT said, well, no, there's this process to go through to get a printer, and you just had to solve that. But meanwhile, someone has been spending a half hour every day for 3 months battling the printer, right? I mean, we've all seen that story, right? So really staying in touch with where's the time going is really important. And again, that other question around, like, ready for change, ready to challenge their thinking. Now, this will never be innate to a team. This is not a natural human behavior, what we're talking about. So it's got to be earned. So you really have to think about, when you get into these kind of conversations internally, get the buy-in of your team. What's in it for me is oftentimes really powerful. what's in it for the organization is also very powerful. What's in it for my teammate? What's in it for my customer, right? All of those things, by the way, are things that employees tend to really relate to. If you go and attack it from the number, hey, we're going to make 2% more profit, very, very hard to get the employees to buy into there, right? There was a great, I think it was Harvard Business Review that spoke to that. And really the idea was more employees want tangible benefits, right? If you try to manage to a number, very hard to get the buy-in. So if you say, hey, if I told you that we could make this customer happier and limit the amount of phone calls you get from them by changing this, would you be open to talk about it? I'd be like, yes. And in your mind, you know that there may be a profit aspect to that conversation of maybe they'll pay me 7 days faster or whatever the goal is. But really the solution to get to that outcome is upstream, right? So really think about if they're not ready to challenge their thinking, which by the way, oftentimes they will not be, how do I earn that? Right. So really, really important considerations in terms of thinking about understanding your workflow. Now, obviously, we've created some different materials online to digitize or not, right? I mean, you kind of like whiteboarding for project management. It's really important to think about in your workflows to find efficiencies. So, mobile app usage is becoming really important. Having your plans available from anywhere, being able to do your daily report from a mobile device. So as you remember something or something happens, you can document it right away. Really, really important to have those things in mind, right? So, obviously, I've got a strong bias when I say this. I do believe that digitizing your organization makes a lot of sense, and leveraging cloud-based solution so that the data is available anywhere and you can use mobile technology seamlessly is very important and makes a lot of sense today. But again, I would still, the heads up is you have to get the buy-in from your team, right? And oftentimes, what you'll find if you look at the different workflows and you understand what happened, you get your team buy-in, the logical conclusion goes, and we should look at a cloud-based software to have all the information in one place, make sure that everybody sees the same thing at the same time. So it's not like stored in multiple files or in my memory on a notepad, right? Very, very important there. So how automation can help your workflows, right? Because now when you've digitized the information, you can do some automation. You can do automatic reminders. You can send information more seamlessly. You can have cleaner reporting. So again, it always goes back to saving time, saving money, reducing the amount of mistakes. It's optimizing your profitability is really a pretty crisp result. But that's the result you look from a higher level. At the employee level, you really have to be clear as to what's in it for them, what's in it for their customer, what's in it for their teammates is really the important part of it. So hopefully this conversation kind of rounds a little bit of the approach to it. And obviously, I think I want to speak a little bit about Red Team and what we do as an organization, right? I mean, for us, we think about manual process, workflows that are broken can be, very risky for a construction company. So we focused on, contract documents being incomplete and the documentation formation itself, helping resolve communication breakdowns, centralizing all that information. We have interactive sharing of documentation, so people are invited as collaborators, but it's not an attachment to an email. Right? So it's not like a flying piece of paper in the back of a truck, as I like to call them. Also knowing, who saw what when, so the metadata capture, really important. So now, hey, I know you saw this RFI, or I know you saw this transmittal, or I know the information because we have the metadata. So part of Red Team, that's natural. That's part of what the platform offers. And then breaking the information silo, and I'll be more specific, let's say the internal information silos. Now, we have to solve them. I don't believe you have to necessarily break the silos. You have to just connect them so people can actually see the same information, right? So you want your accounting team and you want your team in the field and team in the office to be able to see the same information, the same picture, the same question, and so forth, so you can speak with more efficiency to a problem, right? That goes back to your workflows. When an RFI is received, who receives it, who talks about it, who gets to see it, right? And it's not just someone translated it and uses their word and it means something different. So making sure those workflows are really important. So, for us, as far as the software, we thought about ourselves as a company that helps with your business development, your project management, scheduling, field, obviously accounting, construction financials, and as well as quality and safety for the entire project is how we've approached the construction of Red Team software. And we offer also mobile applications. We have Team Player for your subcontractors, Field Share for your GC team for the field. Team Player has been a huge gain for many of our customers using it, helping the subcontractors be able to invoice in AIA style format directly from the field. And what we focused on, talking about workflows, one common complaint that we saw from contractors was, we spent a lot of time managing those invoices. What could make it easier? And one of the core problem that we kept hearing over and over again is that they bill me for stuff that's not in the contract, or they bill me outside the scope, or the line items they have don't match my contract. So in TeamPlayer, we solve that. Actually, now the subcontractor receives the schedule of value that's associated with the contract directly, and they can only bill you against that schedule of value. So it's a very clean process by which you're avoiding that back and forth and having two Excel spreadsheets and someone having to reconcile that at every invoice and make sure that there's not a problem. So TeamPlayer has been really meaningful. And while we don't have a slide for it, you'll start hearing more news about our acquisition we made last December. We actually had a product called Fieldlands. So it's going to offer a lot more like field collaboration tools for the companies. But anyway, I hope today was beneficial in helping you kind of think about this. This was not intended to be, hey, here's a solution. I think oftentimes when it comes to workflows and optimizing workflows, it's more like, how do we approach this problem? How do we tackle this? So that for each company, it's going to be different, right? But the mindset in which you approach this problem, to me, has to be pretty consistent. And I'd love to open it if there's any questions. There's the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you have any questions. I've got a couple more minutes left for today, so be happy to answer any questions that may come up. And if not, I'll give you guys 2 minutes back of your day. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And if you need anything, you know where to find us, redteam.com. And thank you for joining us.